My dearest friends, gather round. Pull your chairs a little closer, let the tea steep for just a moment longer. It's so lovely to have you here, in my little kitchen, where the light falls just so in the late afternoon. It's a safe place, isn't it? A woman's kitchen, the heart of the home. I've spent so many years in this very spot, and I thought I knew every single corner of it, every creak of the floorboard, every chip in the china. But today, I want to tell you a story, my story. And I want to start at the very beginning. Not because it's a happy beginning, but because to understand the event, you have to understand the life that led to it. The tapestry, as it were. The years of quiet weaving that created the fabric of a day that changed everything. I was a wife, a housewife. For 32 years, that was my title, my profession, my identity. I took a perverse sort of pride in it, you know. I remember my mother-in-law, a formidable woman with hair the color of steel wool and eyes that missed nothing, telling me on my wedding day, "A woman's work is never done, but it's the only work that truly matters. You keep a clean house, you put a hot meal on the table, you raise the children right, and you keep your husband happy. That's all there is to it," and I believed her. I swallowed that whole, like a bitter pill coated in sugar. My husband, Robert. Oh, Robert. He was a good provider. I'll give him that. He worked at the same accounting firm for 40 years. He wore the same style of grey suit, the same sensible brown shoes, the same expression of mild, perpetual disappointment. He was a man of habit, of routine. He liked his eggs poached, not fried. His toast lightly browned, his tea brewed for exactly 3 minutes. He liked the newspaper folded just so, the remote control on the right arm of his recliner, and his slippers waiting for him by the back door. And I, in my role, was the curator of this routine. I was the guardian of his comfort. My life revolved around the clock. 6 a.m., rise and shine. 6:15 a.m., Robert's tea. 6:30 a.m., his breakfast. 7 a.m., he leaves for the train. And I begin the day's campaigns, the laundry, the dusting, the mopping, the shopping, the ironing, the cooking. It was a never-ending cycle, a Sisyphean task. By the time he returned at 6 p.m., the house had to be immaculate. The scent of pot roast or chicken pie had to be wafting through the air. And I had to be presentable. Hair done, lipstick on, the happy little woman waiting by the door, and our children, our 2 beautiful girls, Sarah and Emily, they are my greatest joy, my masterpieces. I poured everything I had into them. I was the room mother, the Girl Scout leader, the one who drove them to ballet and piano and swimming lessons. I mended their school uniforms. I soothed their scraped knees. I stayed up late helping with science projects and consoling them over broken hearts. I loved every single minute of it. Truly, I did. Those were the golden years, the years that filled my heart. But children grow up, don't they? It's the cruelest and most wonderful trick of nature. They become independent. They go off to university. They find jobs. They fall in love and get married. Sarah is in Chicago now, a brilliant architect. Emily is in London, working for a publishing house. I am so proud of them it makes my chest ache. They call every Sunday without fail. They're happy, they're successful. And when they call, they always ask, "Mum, how are you? What are you doing?" And for the longest time, my answer was, "Oh, you know, the usual. Keeping things ticking over here. How are you, darling?" I deflected. Because what was there to say? The usual became a hollow echo in the house. The girls were gone. The house that had once echoed, with their laughter, and their squabbles and their music was now silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock and the hum of the refrigerator. The tasks that had once filled my days, that had given me such a profound sense of purpose, began to feel meaningless. I'd dust the mantelpiece, and an hour later, I'd come back and there it was, another layer of dust. I'd cook a beautiful roast chicken for Robert and me, and we'd eat it in near silence, the clinking of cutlery the only sound. The silence wasn't comfortable anymore. It was heavy, oppressive, like a blanket I couldn't throw off. Robert was still there, of course. He was a constant, like the grandfather clock. But his presence was more like an absence. He'd come home, kiss my cheek with the same mechanical precision, eat his dinner, retreat to his recliner to read the paper or watch the news, and then go to bed. We had conversations, certainly. They were about the weather, the neighbors, the price of groceries. We talked at each other, not to each other. I'd tried to tell him about a funny thing I'd seen on the telly, a new recipe I'd tried, a memory of the girls, and he'd nod, a faint hem on his lips, his eyes already glazing over, retreating to some internal fortress where I wasn't invited. I felt invisible. I felt like a piece of furniture, a functional and somewhat decorative, but ultimately overlooked, part of the house. I was Mrs. Robert Henderson. That was my name. My identity was wholly and completely tied to his. I was his wife, the mother of his children. But who was I? I'd look in the mirror at my own face, the crow's feet around my eyes, the grey streaks that were stubbornly appearing in my hair, the slight softening of my jawline, and I'd see a stranger, a woman who had spent her entire life taking care of everyone else, and had forgotten how to take care of herself, a woman who had disappeared. The loneliness was a physical ache. I started taking long walks in the afternoons, just to feel the sun on my face, to hear the birds. I'd walk past other women my age, women who had jobs, who had careers. They'd be power walking in their smart trainers, their hair pulled back in a ponytail, a sense of purpose in their stride. They had places to be, things to do that weren't just laundry and ironing. I didn't feel jealous, not at first. I felt curious. I felt a strange, gnawing hunger. Then, one evening, I saw an advertisement in the local paper. The village library was looking for a part-time assistant. Just 2 days a week. It was tucked away in the classifieds, a tiny, unassuming little box. But it felt like a beacon in the fog. The library. My sanctuary. It had always been my escape. The place I'd go with the girls when they were little. The place I'd go to lose myself in a novel when I had a spare hour. I loved the smell of the books, the quiet reverence of the place, the endless worlds waiting on the shelves. I didn't even have a CV. I hadn't had a job interview in my entire adult life. My hands were shaking just thinking about it. I didn't tell Robert. I couldn't. How could I explain this to him? This restless, yearning feeling that had taken root in my soul. He'd think I was being silly, ungrateful. He'd say, "What do you need a job for? I provide for you, don't I?" And he did. He provided, but he didn't see. He provided a house, but not a home anymore. So I applied. I went in to speak to the head librarian, a wonderful, kind woman named Margaret, who had a shock of white hair and a twinkle in her eye. I told her my story, how I'd raised my family, how I'd always loved books. I felt foolish, like a teenager on her first date, but she just smiled and said, "Margaret, you have a beautiful organizational mind and a love of literature. You're exactly what we need." She gave me the job. I got my first paycheck after the first month. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My own money. My own small, sovereign income. I hadn't had that since before I was married. I felt a thrill I can't describe, a giddy, almost childish excitement. I bought a new book with that first paycheck, a hardback novel I'd been eyeing for weeks. I hid it in my handbag. I was like a secret agent. And then came the morning I told Robert. We were at the breakfast table. He was reading his newspaper, the picture of calm domesticity. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. "Robert," I said, my voice sounding strangely high. "I have some news." He didn't even look up from his paper. I got a job," I blurted out. The paper slowly lowered. He looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. A job? What kind of job? At the library. It's just part-time. 2 days a week. I started a few weeks ago. The words tumbled out, a nervous stream. Silence, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Then a slow, exasperated sigh. A job. Margaret, for heaven's sake, why would you do that? We don't need the money. I'm perfectly capable of providing for you. It's not about the money, Robert, I said, my voice trembling just a little. It's about me. I need something to do. The house is empty now. I need a purpose, something that's just for me. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. It was like a door had closed behind his eyes. He took a sip of his tea, very deliberately. Well, he said, the word dripping with condescension, I see. And what are you going to do about my dinner on those days? My laundry? I'll manage it, I said, my heart racing. I'll do it all before I go. Or I'll get it ready in the morning for you to heat up. He shook his head and went back to his newspaper. It's a foolish notion, Margaret. A passing fancy. You'll be tired. It will disrupt our routine. You'll want to give it up in a month. He didn't forbid it. He didn't yell. He just dismissed it. He dismissed me. That, I think, was worse. He acted as if it were a little hobby, a silly whim of a bored housewife. He didn't see it for what it was, a lifeline. But I stuck with it. I went to the library for those 2 magical days a week, and I felt a part of me come back to life. I was Margaret again. Not just Mrs. Henderson. I got to know the regular patrons. The elderly gentleman who only read naval history. The young mother who brought her toddler for story time. The students who came in to study. They knew my name. They'd say, "Hello, Margaret, how are you today?" And they meant it. They cared about my answer. The work was simple, but it was meaningful. I'd shelve the books, process the returns, help people find what they were looking for. I loved the Dewey Decimal System, the order of it, the logic. It made sense in a way my life at home didn't anymore. I felt valued. I felt competent. For the first time in decades, I felt seen. This went on for 2 years. 2 years of a double life. 2 years of the library Margaret and the home Margaret. At home, Robert's dismissal didn't change. He didn't see me any differently. He saw my job as an inconvenience, a slight on his ability to provide. The same silences, the same routine. The only difference was that the routine had become even more regimented to accommodate my schedule. I'd have to do a week's worth of cooking on the days I was home, leaving him his reheated dinners. He never said thank you. He just ate. But inside, I was changing. I had a secret power. I had a life outside of his. I had friends at the library. Other women like me, some who worked full-time, others who had retired. And we'd share coffee during our breaks and talk about books, and politics and our lives. I was learning new things all the time. I was becoming more confident. I started wearing brighter colors. I let my hair go naturally gray, and I discovered I didn't mind it. It was liberating. And then came the day of the museum gala, the big event. The library had been given a donation to host a fundraiser for a new, local history wing. It was to be held at the City Museum, a grand, marble building in the center of town. Margaret had asked me to help organize it. I was to be one of the coordinators, assisting with the setup, the guest list, the catering. It was a huge responsibility, and I was honored. The gala was on a Friday evening. A Friday, that was a problem. Friday was always Robert's day. It was the day he expected his favorite meal, his mother's recipe for lamb chops, cooked to a perfect pink, with mint sauce and roasted potatoes. It was the day he'd unwind after a long week. It was the day he'd look forward to. I knew I had to tell him. I dreaded it. A week before the gala, I sat him down. I was nervous, my palms sweating. "Robert," I said, "I need to talk to you about next Friday." He didn't look up from the television. "What about it?" I have to work late. The library is hosting a big fundraising gala at the museum. It's a very important event, and I'm a coordinator. I'm needed to help set up and manage things. The flicker of the television reflected in his eyes. Work late. How late? It starts at 7. I'll probably be there until… Well, I'm not sure, until it's over. I'll be home late, maybe around 10:30, maybe even 11. He finally turned to look at me. His face was a mask of stone. 11 o'clock at night. You're going to be out at a party until 11 o'clock at night. It's work, Robert, I said, my voice firm. It's not a party. It's a professional event. He stood up, the remote control clattering to the floor. Professional. You're a librarian's assistant, Margaret, not a managing director. This is absurd. You're not a young woman anymore. You can't be gallivanting around at all hours. Gallivanting. I felt a flash of anger, hot and bright. I'm working. It's a commitment I made, a responsibility I have. I can't just not show up. He turned his back on me and paced to the window. And what am I supposed to do for dinner? You know I have the lamb chops on Friday. I tried to keep my voice calm. I can make them on Thursday instead. I can even prepare them on Thursday and you can just heat them up. It would be the same. It's not the same, and you know it. He spun around, his eyes narrowed. This is your doing. You've got this ridiculous job in your head. And now you're forgetting about your duties at home. It's your duty, Margaret. Your duty to take care of this house and take care of me. Duty, the word hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to say, what about my duty to myself? What about my happiness? But I was still the old Margaret, the one who was scared of his displeasure. So I just said, I'm sorry you feel that way, Robert. But I have to do this. It's important to me. He just shook his head. Fine, do what you want. You always do these days, and he stomped out of the room, leaving me in the flickering silence of the television. The night of the gala arrived. I spent the day in a flurry of activity. I made sure the house was spotless. I prepared the lamb chops on Thursday, left detailed instructions on how to reheat them. I set out his slippers. I did everything I could to mitigate the inevitable fallout. I was wearing my best dress, a deep burgundy velvet number that I'd bought for Sarah's wedding 5 years ago. It made me feel elegant and powerful. As I put on a touch of lipstick in the hallway mirror, Robert came out of his study. He looked at me, his eyes taking in my dress, my carefully styled hair. He didn't say you look nice. He didn't say anything. He just grunted, a sound that was a world away from approval. It was a sound of accusation. I'll see you later, I said, picking up my handbag. He didn't reply. He just turned and walked back into his study. The gala was wonderful. The museum was a magical venue, all soaring ceilings and gleaming marble. The guests, local dignitaries and book lovers, were all beautifully dressed. I felt like a queen, moving among them, making sure the flowers were perfect, that the caterers were on time, that the silent auction was running smoothly. I was Margaret, the important woman. I was doing a good job, a real job. Margaret, the head librarian, complimented me. I don't know what we would have done without you, Margaret, she said. You are a treasure, and I felt it. I felt treasured. The evening flew by. The speeches were lovely, the food was exquisite. I was so caught up in the whirlwind of it all that I barely noticed the time. When we finally started packing up, I looked at my watch and gasped. It was 11:15. My heart sank. Robert was going to be furious. I said a quick goodbye to Margaret, promising to help with the final cleanup on Monday, and practically ran to the train station. The train was delayed, of course. I sat on the platform, my heart pounding, a knot of dread forming in my stomach. By the time I got home, the clock in the hallway, that same old grandfather clock, was chiming 11:30. The house was dark. Not a single light was on in the front, except for the dim glow from the living room. I could feel the tension radiating from the house before I even unlocked the door. The key felt heavy in my hand. I opened the door, and the click of the lock was deafening in the silence. I walked into the living room. The television was off. Robert was sitting in his recliner, the one by the fireplace. He wasn't reading. He wasn't watching anything. He was just sitting there, in the dark, waiting. A glass of whiskey, barely touched, sat on the side table. The lamb chops were on the coffee table. The plate was still covered. He hadn't eaten them. "You're late," he said. His voice was quiet, but it was a dangerous quiet. It was the voice of a storm gathering. "I know, Robert, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice a little breathless. "The train was delayed, and then we had to pack up." "Late," he repeated, cutting me off. He stood up slowly. "I told you I didn't want you to do this. I told you it was a foolish idea. Robert, please, let me explain. It was a big success. We raised so much money for the local history collection. It was really important." I was trying to sound calm, reasonable. "I have been sitting here for 3 hours, Margaret, in the dark, waiting. My dinner is cold. I had to make myself some toast. I am a grown man, and I had to make myself toast for dinner." His voice was rising, a quiver of outrage. I had been home late before. Not this late, but still, he'd been angry. But this was different. There was a coldness in his eyes I'd never seen before. "I'm sorry," I said again, taking a small step toward the kitchen. "Let me just heat you something up, or I can make you a sandwich." He stepped in front of me, blocking my path. He was close to close. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, a scent that now seemed sour and menacing. "You think you can just waltz in here, dressed up like you're someone important, and apologize with a sandwich?" He snarled. "You think that makes it all right? You're my wife, Margaret. You have a duty to be here, at home, where you belong." "Robert, please, let's just talk about this calmly," I said, my heart hammering in my chest. I tried to move past him, and then it happened. It happened so fast, I didn't even have time to flinch. His hand came up and he hit me. It was a loud, sharp slap that cracked across my right cheek. The force of it made my head snap to the side. My ears were ringing. I stumbled backward, a sharp cry of shock and pain escaping my lips. I didn't fall, but I had to grab onto the back of the sofa to steady myself. I stared at him, my hand flying to my stinging cheek, my eyes wide with disbelief. The man I had married, the father of my children, the man I had served for over 30 years. He had hit me. He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. A strange mixture of emotions played across his face: anger, shock, maybe even a flicker of shame. But it was the anger that won. "You deserved that," he said, his voice shaking. "You brought this on yourself. You've been disrespecting me, disrespecting this household, for 2 years. This is what happens when a wife forgets her place." The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over, hot and blinding. But I wasn't crying because of the pain in my cheek, though it throbbed like a second heartbeat. I was crying for the illusion that had just been shattered. The illusion of a stable, safe marriage. The illusion that I was respected. The illusion that I mattered to him. I looked at him, this man I had shared my life with, and I saw him for the first time. I saw a small, frightened man who was so terrified of losing control that he had to use violence to assert it. I saw a man who had been emasculated by his wife's small, secret victory, and his only answer was to try and beat her back into submission. The world around me felt like it was happening in slow motion. I saw the grandfather clock, its pendulum swinging back and forth, a silent, indifferent witness. I saw the dust motes dancing in the dim light from the hallway. I saw the portrait of his mother, the formidable woman, staring down at me from the mantelpiece, her painted eyes seeming to say, "I told you so." But in the midst of that frozen moment, something else happened. A strange, profound, and terrifying sense of calm descended upon me. It was like a great wave that washed away the fear, the shock, the pain. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I straightened up. I lowered my hand from my cheek. I looked him right in the eye. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it was steady. It was the voice of a woman who had had enough. He looked confused. "No. What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no," I said again, taking a step away from the sofa. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to blame me for your own failings. I have not forgotten my place, Robert. You are the one who has forgotten. You forgot that I am a human being. You forgot that I have a mind and a heart of my own. You forgot that I am not a piece of furniture or a servant." I walked to the hallway, and I could feel his eyes boring into my back. I picked up the phone. I could feel his anger behind me, a palpable heat. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp with alarm. I turned to face him. "I'm calling our daughter, Sarah. I'm going to tell her what happened. And then I'm going to pack a bag, and I'm going to leave." His face went white. "You can't leave. This is your home." "This is a house, Robert," I said, my finger hovering over the buttons. "It hasn't been a home for a long time, and you just made it very clear that it never will be again." I didn't call Sarah, not then. I called Emily, in London. I knew she'd be up, working on a manuscript. Her voice was a lifeline in the darkness. I told her everything, my voice choking, with sobs for the first time as the reality of the situation truly hit me. The initial shock was wearing off, and the pain, both physical and emotional, was a gaping wound. She was furious. She was heartbroken. She told me to get a bag, to get out, that she would book me a flight first thing in the morning. "Come to me, Mum," she said. "Just get out of there." I packed a small suitcase. I didn't take much. Just a few clothes, some photos, my new hardback novel, my mother's locket, the things that were truly mine. Robert stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching me with a look of bewilderment. It was as if he truly couldn't comprehend what was happening. The world he had created, the world where he was always right, where his word was law, was crumbling around him. "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice small. "That's not your concern anymore," I said, zipping up my bag. I walked past him, out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and out the front door. I didn't look back. I felt the cool night air on my face, and I breathed it in deep. It was the breath of freedom. My cheek was beginning to swell, a purple bruise blooming on my skin like a dark flower. But I didn't care. It was a badge of honor, a mark of my escape. I called a taxi from the phone box on the corner. As I sat in the back seat, watching the familiar streets of my town slide past the window, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. But it wasn't a loss of Robert, or my marriage, or the life I'd known. It was a loss of the woman I'd been. The woman who had allowed herself to become invisible. The woman who had believed that her only value lay in servitude. But I also felt a wild, soaring hope. I had no idea what was next. I was 58 years old, with a bruised cheek and a suitcase and a plane ticket to London. I had no job to go to, though Margaret had promised me more hours. I had no home of my own. I had nothing but the fierce, unwavering love of my 2 daughters and a newfound, unshakable belief in myself. I stayed with Emily in London for 3 months. It was a healing time. She took such good care of me. She would hold my hand when I cried. She would listen when I raged. And she would laugh with me when I felt the first flickers of joy return. She took me to the theatre, to galleries, to little cafes in Soho. She introduced me to a world I had only ever read about in books. The divorce was, surprisingly, not a battle. It was a formal dissolution. Robert, I think, was too ashamed. His pride was mortally wounded. The idea of the neighbors, his colleagues, his friends knowing that his wife had left him because he had Hit her was a humiliation he couldn't bear. He signed the papers without a fight. He gave me a settlement that was more than fair. I think he just wanted it all to go away, to erase me and the shame from his life as quickly as possible. My daughters, my two brilliant girls, are the ones who gave me my life back. They helped me find a little flat, a cozy one-bedroom in a quiet part of London. Not far from Emily, it was mine. My own door, my own key, my own everything. For the first time in my life, I had a space that was entirely my own. I could put the cushions wherever I wanted. I could eat breakfast at noon if I felt like it. I could read until 3 in the morning and no one would complain about the light. It was blissful and terrifying in equal measure. The library in town, my old library, offered me a full-time position as an assistant librarian. They understood, they didn't pry. I gladly accepted. It was my sanctuary. It still is. That was 5 years ago. I'm 63 now, in case you're counting. And you know what, my dears? I've never been happier. I have my job, which I love. I see my daughters and my grandchildren regularly. My little flat is a mess of books and paintings and plants, just the way I like it. I've even started writing a little, just a blog about books, and a few people have said they enjoy it. I'm not going to tell you that it's all been easy. There were days, especially in the beginning, when I would wake up in the middle of the night and the silence would be so absolute it felt like a physical weight on my chest. The loneliness was a familiar old friend, but I learned to befriend myself. I learned to enjoy my own company. I learned to fill that silence with things that nourished my soul. And Robert, I don't think about him much. I heard through the grapevine that he remarried a younger woman, a proper housewife, I was told. I felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of pity. I pity the new woman, but mostly, I pity him. He's still trapped in that prison of his own making, where the walls are made of routine and expectation, and the bars are his own fear of change. He learned nothing from our marriage. He's still the same man who can only find his own worth by diminishing that of the woman beside him. It's a small, sad life, but it's his to live. There is a particular scene, a memory that has stayed with me from that night. It's the image of my reflection in the hallway mirror just before I left. A woman in a beautiful burgundy dress, her hair askew, a red mark blooming on her cheek. A woman who looked like a queen who had just lost her kingdom. But in her eyes, there was a fire, a fierce, defiant light that said, I am not destroyed. I am just beginning. And that brings me to the point of my story, my dear friends. The reason I'm telling you this, here in my kitchen, with the tea brewing, I'm telling you because I know many of you have felt that same invisible feeling. I've seen it in your eyes when you talk about your husbands, your children, your lives. I've seen the way you sometimes stop yourself mid-sentence, as if to remind yourself that your story isn't as important as someone else's. I see it when you put everyone else's needs before your own, time and time again, until you've completely run out of yourself to give. My story is a cautionary tale, yes. It's a tale about the danger of losing yourself, the danger of mistaking servitude for love, the danger of accepting a silence in your heart because you fear the noise of speaking up. But more than that, my story is a story of hope. It is proof that it is never, ever too late to find yourself, that you can rebuild, even when it feels like everything has been torn down, that the woman you were before you were a wife, before you were a mother, the girl with the dreams and the fire, is still there. She may be buried under years of duty and expectation, but she is not gone. You see, the slap wasn't the start of my story. It was the ending. It was the full stop on a very long, very draining sentence. But it was also the capital letter of a new one. It was the punctuation mark that finally gave me permission to stop being the supporting character in someone else's life and become the heroine of my own. I've learned that my value was never in the meals I cooked, the laundry I folded, or the house I kept. It was in my mind, my heart, my spirit. It was in the books I loved, the conversations I craved, the person I was when I wasn't trying to be someone else's idea of a perfect wife. It's a precious thing, your life. And it's a precious thing, your soul. Don't let anyone, not even the person you love, convince you that one is less important than the other. So I look at my two daughters now, my Sarah and my Emily, and I see them living their own lives with such strength and independence. And my heart swells. And I look at my little flat in London, my sanctuary of books, and I think, this is my kingdom. This is my life. Because of that slap. It was a terrible, wicked thing, but it was the most honest thing he ever did. It showed me the truth. It broke the spell. It set me free. And for that, in a strange way, I am almost grateful. I realize now that I wasn't just a housewife who got a job and came home late. I was a woman who was slowly drowning in a life that was slowly suffocating her. And a job wasn't a hobby, it was a life raft. And it was in the moment when he tried to sink that raft, and all of me with it, that I finally learned how to swim. So I urge you, my dears, let this story be a salve. Let it be a reminder. The next time you feel invisible, the next time you feel taken for granted, the next time you feel like your world is shrinking, look in the mirror. Look deep into your own eyes. Is there still a fire there? Is there still a dream? Fan that flame. Nurture it. It's yours, and no one, not your husband, not your children, not the world, has the right to extinguish it. Because in the end, the grandest adventure of all is not the one you find in a book, or the one you take to a foreign land. It is the journey you take back to yourself. And, my loves, it's the most beautiful, breathtaking, and absolutely the most important journey you will ever make. And now, I believe the tea is ready.